You're listening to the Changing Normal podcast, where we strive to outdo the old normal and reject the new normal. And now your hosts, Owen, Dan, and Ben.
Welcome to the Changing Normal podcast. We are on episode 15. It's August the 11th. Owen, Dan, and I this week, we're going to chat a little bit, obviously, what we either learned or did or anything interesting in the past week. We're going to kind of touch on CBDCs and what that may hold, kind of look at what they are, and then we're going to kind of go on the polar opposite of what last week's episode was and try to be a little more optimistic. It was kind of a heavy episode last week, and then we've got some news stories that we're going to chat about, just kind of springboard off of those and see where the discussion goes. But Owen, I see you got quite a list in there for this past week.
Well, just because you guys don't write anything down.
Yeah, guilty.
So I've been, as I talked a little bit about, I think last week, about beekeeping and maybe getting into that. So I've been busy. This past week, I sort of took the plunge and ran with my, the new thing mentality, and went out and bought some sheets of plywood and built myself a bunch of swarm traps, because I'm hoping to catch my own swarms in the spring.
Right on. And
so worked away at building those. Was away for the weekend, and then this week I finished them up. So they're all set to go, including the frames. The frames I've got to wire them yet. The wire just came today, so I've got to drill holes and run my wires through it for the foundation to mount on. So then the next thing will probably be to actually start the hives themselves. So stay tuned for that.
Looking forward to it.
I had to actually use my car kit that people may have heard me talk about back a few weeks back, a month ago, maybe now, I don't remember. So while I was away, came out one morning and there was my rear tire, not flat, but it was significantly, it was kind of squishy. So
it's only flat on the bottom.
Yeah, it's only flat on the bottom. That's right. But I was on an island that has one gas station somewhere on the island with basically no place to get air. Anywhere's close. So yeah, I was like, I know how to fix this. So I pulled out my battery powered air compressor and plugged it into the cigarette lighter, and 5 minutes later had a nice full tire and we're all set to go.
Sweet.
Yeah. So maybe next week we're going to talk more in depth about that car kit.
Sneak peek.
Something like that. Yeah. We'll kind of
that'd be fun.
Go over
See
it.
what you've got in that, because mine's very basic. I do have a little 12-volt air compressor. I've got like a tire plug kit, but that's about it.
Well, I'd like to get your guys' input too. Maybe I'm missing something. So that would be fun to chat about that. I started stamping seed phrases, duplicate seed phrases into washers, which is how I store them. So trying to make a second full set for all my wallets. And then I did have another one for my daughter that I had to stamp out. So,
cool.
Got that.
Yeah.
I've started planning for a new heating system for the house. So I've been consumed the last couple of days of trying to figure out how that's all going to come together in my current space/building area, where I, without getting too crazy expensive or having to dig the yard all up again. So anyway, my big thing today was storage, because I'm adding a wood-fired hot water boiler because I have hydronic heating in my house. And so today was the way this boiler I'm going to be putting in, it works best. It's almost a requirement to have some sort of water tank that you can heat and use like a storage. Water's cool because you can store energy really well in water. Not quite as good as Bitcoin, but you can. you
Okay, Mr. Sailor.
You can store energy. You can't store energy in air, really, things like that. But you can store energy in water. And so if you have a large enough heat volume of water, you can store a lot of energy there, which then I can then draw on for the house. And my heating system hopefully will be run more efficiently and not have to keep a constant fire going all the time. So you add a buffer in. So it's just trying to figure out, I have a connection with a guy who has access to a lot of hot water heaters. So I think that's the route I'm going to go for my water storage. I'm going to put in 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever I can fit in 60-gallon water heaters and tie them all in series and then plumb that all together so that my boiler will just heat all that water. So I'll have a couple 100 gallons of water to store heat in.
Okay, neat. Yeah, so what little I've read about it, I mean, you mentioned how good water is at holding energy, but the risk that seems to be mentioned a lot is that you can turn things into a bomb because you can pressurize water when you heat it.
That's right.
So you've got some engineering to make sure there's no pressure buildup.
Yeah, basically you want to make sure you have some sort of expansion tank in your system. And so all heating systems, water heating systems, have some sort of tank with a bladder in it so that as the water expands when it's heating, it can, not overpressure the system. And it's not going to create a bomb per se at the pressures that most heating systems are. And all good heating systems should have a pressure relief valve built into them. So those are usually around 30 pounds PSI. So that's not even really high pressure at all. It's the lower end of what most people would have in their house. And when it gets up to that pressure, it'll blow off. But then, of course, you lose water. And if you don't have pressure in your system, the system doesn't circulate properly. So you want to maintain a constant pressure. And so you do that with an expansion tank that allows that hot water as it heats and cools to flux, to expand into that space. And then you also have a temperature valve in that as well, preferably. So you want pressure, and then you want a temperature one as well. So that, well, that's not actually true. Some of them have temperature, but actually most heating systems don't have a temperature. Hot water, your hot water tank, like in your house, will have a temperature, a pressure and temperature. But most heating systems don't. And the way they work is they just have the pressure. And if your heating system overheats and actually starts to boil the water, water expands 1,700 times when it turns to steam.
I mean, that makes sense.
So if you have that sealed with no way for that to blow off, that's when you create a bomb. The instant that starts to expand, your pressure spikes, boom, and your 30-pound pressure relief blows off, relieving the pressure. Okay, so as long as you have, a relief valve and the proper safety valves in, you won't blow yourself up. I don't know if you ever saw those Mythbusters videos where they put a pressure tank or a hot water tank on the first floor of a 2-story structure with a roof. Like they actually built like a mini house, 2-story house over the tank. And then they pressurized that tank to see how much pressure before it would blow up. It went through the first floor, second floor, and roof, and I don't know how many 100 feet in the air. So that gives you an idea how dangerous. I don't know. They had like hundreds and hundreds of PSI on that thing. It was crazy.
Yeah. Okay, so at least we know that it's possible to build a bomb that way.
Yeah. And the only other thing I did was fight with people on the internet about Bitcoin today. So,
well, that's always fun. Were they pirate chain people or fiat people?
It was one of these like random Facebook articles that pops up, like marketing.com or some kind of thing, and there was some stockbroker dude guy that made some pronouncement against Bitcoin, how Bitcoin was dead, and it was a scam, and it was
another obituary.
Yeah, another obituary, and so I had to go in the comments. And there's all kinds of. One person, all he said was 21 million Bitcoin. That's all he said, and then there was people all over him.
Nice.
But he never replied at all. I did all the replying. I was just putting out fires all over the place. Trying to explain to people about. Anyway, I don't know why I do this to myself, but anyway.
Yeah.
Some of them.
Crazy thing is,
some of the interactions actually were good. Like some of the people.
Oh, that's good.
Like some were just like, you're an idiot. You don't know what, some of them were just dumb, stupid, moron people. But some of them, they were skeptical and trying to argue against it. But at least they were trying to put forward some sort of logical
argument.
Yeah, reasonable argument. So that at least you feel like, okay, I can engage this person and maybe I plant a seed. Maybe they read it and go, okay, maybe I need to look into this a little more. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, that's exactly what you guys did to me. Dan, we missed you last week.
Oh,
and
that's good to hear.
you gave us the opportunity to flap our gums longer than we have yet.
I didn't get through the show yet, so I didn't hear everything you guys said.
Good to have you back, man.
Yeah, it's good to be back. Oh, I haven't had a lot going on yet as far as my projects. Continuing the cold room part, I've got a corner of my basement cleaned now. So that was a little bit longer than I expected it to, and I've got out my my notepad and I'm making notes about all the materials now. Got to line up all this stuff, and I don't think it'll take too long to throw together. I'm feeling optimistic.
Awesome.
We'll see. Reality will probably prove otherwise.
You gotta love like those the memes where it's like expectation versus reality. It's like the or the Pinterest fails. Those ones, they always make me laugh. Oh man.
Yeah, that's kind of like that meme I saw on Facebook today somewhere. How to stay on top of the laundry when you live on a farm. It has 1 and 2. 1, you can't. 2, find a new dream.
Oh my land. Well, this last week has been decently uneventful. I got to see a couple friends' pole barns that they are working on and in the process of getting done. A couple homesteads, and just kind of really got thinking about what I want to strive for as far as building a house and making sure that self-sufficient as possible. So we were at the second pole barn friend's place we were there for supper, and one of their goats was giving birth, so we got to see the emergence of a new life. And it was surprising because it picked up on nursing on the mother pretty quick, a lot faster than the cows I'm used to. But
yeah, goats and sheep are incredibly fast to get up on their feet.
It's like right around 5 or 10 minutes and it was standing, and then it was nursing within the next 5 or 10. So it was that was pretty cool to see. And then I was listening to what was I listening to? It was a podcast interview that it might have been the Bitcoin Magazine podcast. And
I listened to so much of their show this last week. I literally, one day at work this week, I listened to a solid like 7-8 hours of the Bitcoin Magazine podcast.
Did you listen to the one where Guy Swan talked about utilizing Bitcoin miners as a heat source for his house?
On the Bitcoin Magazine?
I'm pretty sure it was. Or was that a different one?
Well, it must have been on his show.
No, it wasn't. It was definitely.
Okay. Well, he's talked about it on his show before on Bitcoin Audible. So I've heard him talk about it on there.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the idea. I mean, we know that heating with electricity, I mean, it's basically engineered to be inefficient. Because an electric burner is simply something that's a really poor conductor.
That's right.
Just got a lot of resistance.
Yeah, the heat is actually a byproduct of the inefficiency.
Exactly. So, yeah, heating with electricity in that format makes very little sense. So the idea of doing computing and having the byproduct being put to use to heat your house instead of simply wasting electricity by driving it through a poor conductor.
Right. Man,
it sounds really cool. Yeah.
I've done some looking into it and crunching some numbers on it. You wouldn't break even if you're using like an old S9 miner.
Okay. That's interesting because that's what he was saying he was going to get.
Yes. Now, I don't know what the electricity rates are where he lives.
True.
I based it on here.
Or heat requirements, of course.
Or heat requirements.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but I think I want to say an S9, it was like equivalent to like a 1500 watt heater, which is a pretty, I mean, that'll heat a room.
Oh, yeah. Not
like super well, but it, it will heat a room.
Yeah.
So anyway, it was just kind of I kind of looked into that a little bit and was crunching some. There's a few websites out there where you can do the calculations on efficient miners, and you put in the miner and you can go and it'll give you all the, like, what's your electricity rate and all that kind of stuff. And then it'll tell you, here's how much money you make. Here's how much Bitcoin you would get. Here's how much money you would make at your current electricity rates or lose, depending on the case. So with an S9, it was definitely going to be a net loss, I think.
Okay.
But some of the new miners was actually really good.
The ones that are like 10 grand.
Try 20. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. The sort of the latest technology coming out. It's way more efficient, and you could actually make a ton of money
while heating your house.
While heating your house. The difference is you're sinking like 20 grand.
Startup cost.
That's an expensive space heater.
Well, but like when I heard him mention that, I was like, okay, interesting. You do it in the basement and you get the residual heat rising up through the house. But it made me think of the Brave ads for the Heatbit space heater.
Yep.
Okay, interesting. But it was one of those things that's just like, that'd be really cool. But I mean, I was just spitballing pretty much because I've really got in my head, like just needing to be more prepared and just continually getting better at being better at thinking ahead instead of being proactive instead of reactive.
Right.
So yeah, between the Bitcoin Magazine podcast and the Jordan Peterson podcast, it's been a lot of listening time lately.
Yeah, it's funny how that stuff goes in cycles. I used to hate the Bitcoin Magazine podcast. I couldn't stand those guys. But I was just like, maybe I'm just getting old. But I was just like, who are these young guys that talk like this? And like, oh, it was just anyway. And it had a few good ones, and then I was like, okay, well, actually, I'm getting used to this. And then, yeah, no, it's pretty good.
Well, you might have overloaded it with what 7 hours of it.
Yeah, it was just like, some sort of like weird torture, forcing myself to listen to it. No, it was good. I mean, they've had a lot of economists on lately, like conventional pro Bitcoin economists, so like hedge fund managers and other people. So it's been really interesting to hear those guys make their predictions on the market and what they think is going to happen over the next year, both with the regular markets, but also, Bitcoin, how Bitcoin's going to react to things. So yeah, it's pretty kind of neat to hear that stuff. I mean, obviously a prediction is only a prediction, but
well, there's lots of speculative predictions kind of floating around CBDCs and what they could usher in as far as like the next era of banking. And that's what we've got as our crypto corner.
I give up. But look at this guy's like the Segue king. It doesn't seem to matter. Like, there's no planning here. It's just like we just wrote this down like 20 minutes ago or whatever, and he's just able to segue into this. Amazing. Wish I could do that. That's your superpower. That is your new podcast nickname. We're gonna call you
Segue.
Segue.
That's
You're
not
the
quite
first.
nickname I was
You're
hoping for.
you're the first one to get a nickname on the show.
Oh my goodness. Oh boy. So CBDC, central bank digital currency. I think it's fun. I think it's funny when this kind of comes up because, what is it, like 97% of our just standard fiat currency is in digital form anyway, right? Like it's all interacting. It's, at least here in Canada, it's e-transfers, or in the States, it's whatever it is, like PayPal, Venmo, whatever. But where was I going with that?
Well, it's definitely the case. We already have a digital currency
Yes.
with a tiny bit of cash that is not currently digitally tracked exactly, but we're already there. But a central bank digital currency would be a bit of a leap forward in that it would place a lot more control into the hands of a government agency. Presumably, central bank that is directly overseen by the government. Whereas right now, I think commercial banks have a lot more power even than central banks do. Definitely once you factor in the lobbying that they do.
Yeah.
We all know how big money lobbying works.
Yeah, the government's still in control, but if the government wants to shut down someone's account, they have to, actually take that step of going. I mean, in theory, they should be getting a court order, and it's not, quote unquote, emergency time. They have to get a, court order and all that kind of stuff and actually go to the bank and say, this person's doing something illegal. We want you to shut down their account, et cetera. And so there's some steps involved there.
Right.
Yeah, the information's not all gathered into a single point either.
That's
because
right.
The commercial banks aren't sharing all of their data with each other.
That's right.
So my bank knows a lot about me, but they're not giving it over to your bank, probably.
Right.
Not everything anyway. So the information is split up. Whereas under a CBDC system, it would probably be totally centralized.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So we're looking at a social credit. Would we be looking at more of a social credit score system with that much control kind of being?
Well, you wouldn't necessarily have to attach that. For the people who are marketing the idea of a CBDC, they're probably talking about the pure economics of it. And they say, they can stimulate the economy when it needs to be if they have a little more control, or throttle things back. So, we have all the talk now about maybe they'll raise inflation or cut inflation according to how the political mood about the economy goes. But whether or not that's actually doing what they intended to be doing, that's hard to say. But a CBDC, they could have a pretty tight control on the money flowing in and out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, yeah, they're going to spin it as a positive. They're going to point out all the things at first. Hey, you can register your car here. You can pay your bills here, all in one convenient location. You can pay your taxes. You can, you know what I mean? Like all of that stuff they'll bring into this, one app or website or however they decide to roll it out initially. Look how easy it is to pay your, buy your food with your phone at the store kind of thing, right? It's all there. That's how it's going to be spun. I'm quite sure.
Man,
all those
I don't know
positives.
if they could sell it on that point though, because how many people are going to believe the government can provide a better service?
Well, this is the thing. I mean, we're going to talk about this a little later. I think there's a lot of people waking up to the fact they can't, but I don't know, man. There's still a ton of people out there that.
Well,
see, I could see them selling, that's how they keep us from going into depression, and not explaining how it works, of course. No need for details. But claim they're going to provide a better user interface when we all know that wouldn't happen.
Oh my land. Just go onto your local provincial government website and we'll see. And then go on to something that is a private company's website and see how the user experience turns out there.
Yeah.
Just the federal website.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how that's rolled out. And maybe they won't roll it out. Maybe they'll get a private company to do it and way overpay them. But I don't know. They have, if they want to administer the control, which generally I think we believe government, history has shown us government always seeks to gain more control.
And never relinquishes it once they gain it.
And never relinquish it generally. So if that's the goal, then they're going to want to centralize it into some method of access for them, direct access. The only way to do that is through a person's phone. Really?
Yeah, directly issuing financial accounts to people.
Right.
Yeah. Definitely the incentive is there for government agencies or people who want to head up a brand new government agency. You can definitely see why they would be on board. The commercial banks, though, what do you have to give them to get them to releasing power? Because they would have to give up power that they currently have in the commercial banks and let a government agency take over. So what do they get in return? And that's what I haven't figured out. And definitely from what lobbying we can see so far, for example, the bill in the States that Senator Cruz brought forward, he wanted to block the government from issuing financial accounts directly, basically. And I think that was tied into lobbying from commercial banks. But in some places, there isn't as much of a split of power. Like China is already very heavily tilted towards government agency control, and they have some form of a CBDC. It's kind of hard to actually find out what they've got.
Yeah.
So
I don't think it's unreasonable to think that banks could still have a lot of the functions that they currently have. Like what the bank's big moneymaker is not you and me having a checking account or a savings account or any of that. Their big moneymaker is lending and investment. So if all the government really has to do is say, listen, we're going to handle all the personal accounts, but you still get to lend everybody money.
Okay.
And maybe, I don't know how that all looks in the details in the background, but it wouldn't surprise me if that is still the case, or if it's even formatted in such a way that
they're utilizing the CBDC to do said.
100%. But you might even have it. My app might even have my bank's name on it.
Oh, like a rebrand, so that it kind of routes.
It looks like I'm doing, business with whatever Bank of Montreal, but really it's all it's
okay.
So the bank doesn't. I'm just speculating, obviously, how they could do that, but
it's going to be
so instead of the
Skynet.
banks maintaining their own ledgers, basically they all route back to the government centralized ledger.
Yes.
Yes, yeah. I could definitely see that happening. So whether or not we'll see that here, it's hard to say. I found it interesting that Nigeria, for example, has contracted to have a CBDC rolled out. They have a contract with a European company. So there's definitely countries like going full steam ahead with this now. Could be the test case, and there will be more public data available about how that works for them.
I haven't heard too much in Canada about it. That certainly not by name. But there's certainly, things like the vaccine passports and, those sort of digital ID. That's another way that they're going to also probably spin it as a positive. Hey, this app's not just your bank account. It's also your driver's license and your insurance cards and your passport, and everything is all wrapped into that. So it's convenient and easy.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That definitely is the concern, is that Chinese style total social control, where you can be cut out of the systems if you are seen as undesirable, if your behavior's bad in any way. Yeah.
Well, it's continually becoming normal to have the toe of the government entity trying to gain control. Who would have thought that 3 years ago that now you need, or air quotes, need an app on your phone to get back into your own country, which can then be turned on remotely and tracking your phone. But I was listening to an interview, and it was a Bitcoin centric interview, but they started talking about CBDCs, and a couple of the comments were that there are quite a few Bitcoiners who actually see it as a positive, and they didn't actually they didn't delve into it in a way that explained why they viewed it as a positive, and whether it's they may or may not have been quite as individual sovereignty. Like, I know that's kind of, we may or may not be a little bit anomalous on that side of the Bitcoin side of things.
Ooh, big words.
My dinosaur thesaurus, he's out in the backyard. No, I jest. But it was the first time that I had actually heard a CBDC referred to in a positive light, and I hadn't really been able to wrap my head around it. And then we're like, we're going to talk about CBDC, and I'm thinking, crap, I wish I had dug a little bit deeper into that. But all of that in a roundabout way to say, have you guys mostly just seen or thought about a CBDC in a more negative light, I guess?
Well, here's the thing. It could be done in a very efficient, very useful way. It could be a great financial tool. The thing is, it requires trust. and a centralized authority.
Right.
And that's not something I'm willing to do at this point. I just haven't seen any evidence that it's not going to be corrupted and turn into a way of maintaining power for a select few once they get control.
And that's the way of everything. I mean, there's so many things we can point to and say this started as a good thing. Like welfare, employment insurance, like all these social programs that we see in our socialist country. And we go, like, that was done to help people. That was done with the idea of these people are falling through the cracks in society and we want to help them. Let's, take tax money and support these people that can get back on their feet and all of that. And what's happened now, we've got these entire generations of people who abuse these social systems, and things like that. So we see all of those things, and then that doesn't even mention like the whole side of like the Emergencies Act is a good example. There might be a time when the Emergencies Act actually has a legit use. During wartime is a great example. Maybe natural disasters, something like, I don't know, a giant glacier slides off the North Pole and crushes Toronto. Okay, that's a bad example. But you know what I mean? Like there could be legitimate uses for that. But it also, when you have a malicious government, the wrong government, or one bad actor, can also take that same thing intended for good and twist it and use it for evil. And so that's the problem with giving anybody that kind of authority or powers, is you're going to find corrupt people that will use it for corrupt reasons. So that's why anything has to be, any legislation passed, I've said this for years, anytime a government passes legislation, the argument against bad actors is always, but that's not what it's for. That's not what they're going to do with it. They're doing this to help people. That to me is always a poor argument, because I say, yeah, but you're not going to be in power forever. It might be 4 years, it might be 10 years, it might be 50 years, but someday someone is going to be in power who's going to take that and abuse it, because it has the potential for abuse. So any legislation that has any potential for abuse should not exist, which means most legislation should not exist. And I'm okay with that. So that same logic, I guess, applies, as Dan said, to a CBDC, in that you're having to trust the government, whoever's administering the CBDC, to not abuse that, but also generations from now to not abuse it.
Right.
And that's the problem, because we can't predict the future. We can't predict people's morality in the future. We can't.
Except for 21 million.
Right. And so then there's certain things that we can, because it's not centralized and it doesn't depend upon human corruptibility.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to get that question in there because Dan talked about it a little bit, and then you kind of touched on it, and then it just got me thinking about that episode where it was kind of in a more negative, or sorry, a more positive spin. So, but I mean, oh man, we bounced straight down along the road of doom and gloom a little bit.
No, that's right. I mean, like, let's face it, centralized systems tend to be more efficient.
True.
If I store all of my food at 50 different points in my yard, it's very decentralized, but it's not efficient for me to gather and collect when I want that food. It's much more efficient to keep it all in the refrigerator.
Yeah.
But if my refrigerator blows up, I've lost all my food. right? So there is more efficiency in the centralized system, but there's also much more potential for loss and things to go bad when things go bad.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. So certain things should be centralized and certain things should not be centralized. You know, your personal food storage of your week's food in the refrigerator, yeah, it could probably be centralized, because if your fridge blows up, you know, you're probably not starving to death. You know, I have other food in other places. You know, even that is not completely centralized. Not every ounce of my food is in one place. We probably don't want an entire country's worth of food centralized in one place.
Yeah.
Right?
That's
We're
fair.
talking on different scales. So the same thing, but on a different scale. Now, all of a sudden, the centralization, while more efficient, has much greater risk associated with it. And so the inefficiency is worth it to eliminate or mitigate the risk.
Right.
So a centralized currency to administer with all your IDs and the whole bit, sure, that's more efficient, but it's also very subject to abuse, especially at that high level that affects millions and millions and millions of people. Mm-hmm. So maybe we want to decentralize that so that there's checks and balances in the system. Like we don't need a parliament. We could have a monarchy. We could have all the power centralized to one person. Very efficient. Things get done in no time flat. The king says, make it so, and it happens, right? There's no votes. There's no debate. We don't need any of that, right? Until you have a bad monarch, right? So that we want to decentralize. That's why parliamentary systems, you know, republic type systems in the United States, that's really what those systems are for, is to decentralize the power, mm-hmm. so that there's checks and balances in the system.
Right. Yeah, exactly. No, it's pretty hard. It's pretty hard not to look at Bitcoin in a positive light, even if it starts running as like a parallel economy with a CBDC, because it brings that level of individual responsibility and the personal sovereignty with it. Mm-hmm. And I mean, like, we've even got Bitcoin in our main topic as reasons to be optimistic about the future here in North America. I mean, it's almost one of those things, like, because it's one of those things that kind of gets a little overwhelming to think about at the start, because, you know, like, personally, when I think about things I have to be optimistic about, I'm kind of overwhelmed with all the ways that I feel blessed in my life, like in day to day, you know, just the little things. But then there's, oh shoot, where was I going with that?
I think you were trying to segue to the main topic.
Well, no, I thought I already segued into
it. He was already in and you didn't even notice.
Man, smooth. That is smooth. Oh.
But I now have it back. You want to be optimistic while being realistic and not getting hopped up on hopium. Hope and opium.
I thought you were going to say hopistic.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, realistic, optimistic, hopistic. What was the other one you used? I forget. Anyway.
Well, no, but I mean,
squirrel.
Oh my goodness. Why am I the host this week?
I think it's because you're the host this week.
That's just the way the cookie crumbles. Man. But while being like, yeah, just being optimistic, but not up in the clouds, and, you know, realizing that, I have to actually put in some work and do what needs done, and I was going to say pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but that's got a very negative connotation with it these days. But no, I mean, we're looking to kind of roll off of that as far as what last week's episode was, and kind of go on the more positive spin this week. So where we're in North America, there's a lot of opportunities here, and it kind of gets spun in, first world problems, but,
Yeah, I think that's a good starting point. I mean, like you mentioned, of just getting out there and starting to do things. I mean, that's a bit of a diversion from, staring at the evening news and learning about what you need to be scared about and upset about, and
change the
you
normal.
can't do anything about. So it can be a bit daunting to maybe launch into a different path where you are more responsible for the things that need to change. But it also does lead to more optimism. I mean, that's what I found anyway. I feel more optimistic about the future when I'm actually doing things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do think the point of focus, we're going to kind of focus this on North America, because I'm not sure everywhere in the world has the same reason for optimism as us in North America does. Is that even proper grammar? Us in North America does? Do?
Probably do.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry, folks. I was home teached. But yeah, I think other places, some of these things may not necessarily apply. Now, there may be things that those people have that we don't, but I don't want to comment on that because I'm not there. So we'll focus on North America, the Western world. Probably is the best place for us to comment on, at least for me to comment on.
Yep. This is something we were thinking about before the show. In what way we have more opportunity than the vast majority of humans in history. And I think we really do have more than most. If you look at the struggles our ancestors had to go through, whether that's like Spanish flu in early 1900s, or even just settling and scratching out a living with basic tools, building your own cabin and trying to clear a plot of land, plant some grain and potatoes. They had it way tougher than we do. So
oh yeah, I mean, life is so much easier. I don't think we have any concept of how hard life was even 150 years ago. And I think right now we're in like the wealthiest time in history. That the things we have, the technology we have, if you want to measure wealth based on the lack of necessity to physically survive, we have it pretty darn good. Like, we're pretty rich in that sense. That's interesting. I thought about that, and because I've heard that said a couple times, and I've heard it said both in relation to economics and not. And considering that Keynesian economics is really, a 70, 80 year thing, let's say the last 100 years even, it hasn't been quite around that long. It's really been more of a 50-year experiment, but a little bit longer than that. Anyway, is our wealth that we currently have legit wealth, or is it fake wealth because it's based on Keynesian economics? It's based on a fiat money system that is not sound money, but yet we also say that we're very wealthy. But is that wealth, like, can we be both at the same time? Does that make sense? I've asked myself that question, and I don't really know the answer.
I feel like I could argue either side of that. in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, because we definitely have, way better tools than we ever have.
Mm-hmm.
Zoom.
But then again, we're also very reliant on the current system of trade and how fast and quickly we can get things.
That's
So
right.
all of a sudden, our better tools become, you can't have that delivered anymore. So more fragile, I would say. But the wealth seems to be real, at least as long as as long as the wheel keeps turning.
Well, this is the thing, right? I mean, this is the question that popped into my head was, does that go away with the failed experiment of our current economic system, which is, there's no mistake, it's a failed experiment. I don't think even modern economists, who are not Austrian economists, I don't even think they're under any kind of illusion about our current system. Like, they might not see an alternative like we do in Bitcoin, but I'm not sure that anybody is saying, "Oh yeah, this is all great."
I think it's a resiliency thing, because when Dan was talking about, the people that settled these countries, like just clearing a plot of land with whatever tools you were able to carry into the woods, and being able to roll with the punches, as you mentioned earlier, Owen, because we're almost like in a cushy situation now.
Mm-hmm.
The resiliency seems to be gone to be able to like with a fragile system, as Dan mentioned, and the reliance on it, the resilience seems to be gone, and that ability to find workarounds, even to the point of when something fails, that people don't step up and utilize what their gifts and talents may be. It's just a kind of, it failed. So that's kind of where my mind was thinking on that sort of line. Because I know I've mentioned it before, trying to build up your own personal resilience to different things.
Yeah, I think this is a fair caveat to point out we don't know how long things will be quite as prosperous, but I think we still have a good situation now, and that means we have a lot of opportunity to act now, even if we don't have the guarantee of being able to do as much 20 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
And thus the title of our show. That's what it's all about right there. Because the people that are able to change and make that pivot, they really will be, I don't want to say the wealthy ones, but they will be wealthy in many ways that other people are not in the future.
Mm-hmm.
As the Keynesian experiment continues to fail and crash and burn,
there's a lot of energy stored up in this system. It keeps burning for quite a while.
That's right. It's all based on that petrodollar, right? So the oil burns. So the people who are able to pivot and watch it go by them and burn down the hill, those are the people probably going to come out the other side a little bit less burnt. Anyway, we'll probably talk a little bit about that later when we get to Bitcoin. But
right now we do have, beyond wealth, we have the internet. It's the greatest access to information history has ever had. I've always loved that little turn of phrase that said, we have more information than all those ancient libraries of the past in our pockets, and we use it to argue with strangers on the internet.
Yep. Guilty.
Yes. Likewise.
It happens. But that is something we don't often stop to think about simply how much information we have at our fingertips.
Mhm.
Some people might complain and say, well, there's also just as much misinformation. But I think if you can't tell the difference, work on the skill of combing through and finding what's good and useful.
Yeah. Well, I even think of practical things, like, okay, so I'm learning a couple new skills over the next 6 months to a year. So the beekeeping thing is going to be new for me. I know a little about it and I've read, but if I didn't have the internet, I would literally have to find someone who did it nearby and physically go there and have them teach me every aspect of that. But I would be limited to their experience and knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
With the internet, I have access to everyone's experience and knowledge from the comfort of my own home.
Kind of like what Benji said when he was talking about combing through the homesteading forums. You gotta sift through it a little bit.
Yeah. But at the same time, you do get those gems that you would never get. The master beekeeper who's been doing it for 40 years somewhere out west, who I would never meet in my life or have the opportunity to meet to learn from. But because he posts on some internet forum, I can read his, posts about that. Ham radio. The other thing I'm going to learn about this winter. Same thing. I went on the internet, a few clicks of the button, books in the mail. I didn't have to figure out what book to get, it's all there. I probably even could have found it for free if I really wanted to, but I'm not that guy. Sometimes it's easier just to order stuff. But you know what I mean? Like, it's going to be here and I'm going to read a book, but the internet got me that book. The internet got me the recommendation that that's the book I should have. And maybe I would have more channels of access to, different resources. If I didn't have the internet, I would have been forced to develop those through the course of my life. Maybe I'd be a smarter person without the internet because I simply would have had to remember all this instead of using the internet. Yeah, the internet as a crutch in that respect. Maybe. I don't know.
It's a massive resource, right?
It really is.
And Dan kind of mentioned that when we started talking about the internet and the utilization of resources in thinking of it in a permaculture lens, in a sustainable and ethical way, is not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, because now you're going to have those skills and the resources will be passed on to the next generation, probably, myself, as we chatted about it in the future, things like that. Like, it's not just trying to keep a positive spin on it.
And not even that. I mean, we have a need, and we're going to talk about government schools, but just the fact that anybody now can go take college level courses for free online if you do a little searching around. Yeah, maybe you're not going to go become a brain surgeon, but not everybody's becoming brain surgeons. You can probably find a course that'll give you a qualification in something to help you go get a job.
Yep.
You don't need to go get a 4-year degree. It's so like that. That to me is one of the biggest things with the internet to view as an optimistic opportunity for the future.
Right.
Yep. An interesting example of perspective and utility is what you make of it, because the internet can either make you the most cynical person on earth or make you the most optimistic.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true.
That's
you can.
True.
Yeah. Just depends on how much time you spend on Twitter and Facebook.
Twitter's worse. Wow. It's true.
I don't know.
Yeah. Twitter's just like a great big dumpster fire. Facebook is like a screaming mob. Stay tuned for our Facebook page coming soon.
Yeah, that's right.
I think another reason for optimism is that even while we're in what we consider an energy crisis and gas prices are ridiculous and diesel prices are so high, we still have a relative abundance of energy, and we can still tap into that to do a lot of cool things. Whether that's heavy equipment that you can use to get things done quickly. I mean, can you imagine going back to just using your shovel to do all the projects you want to do around your home?
My hands in my
I hope
back
we never
hurt.
go to that. I do a fair bit by hand, and I don't have to do everything to that, and it would definitely prevent bigger projects. So I'm going to chalk that up to a category of optimism. We still have fairly cheap equipment, electricity. We complain, but we're still rather fortunate.
Yeah, we
All
still
things
live in a
considered.
resource-rich country. Like if you associate energy with resources and things like that, there's so much untapped resource there, and energy potential. Yeah.
Future Crypto Corner episode, Bitcoin as energy.
Yeah, that would be a good one.
Yeah, maybe so. So another thing, freedoms we still currently have. What do you guys think about that one?
I mean, we complain a lot about, well, maybe we don't complain a lot. I kind of complain a lot about the loss of freedom I've seen even in my short life. But we still have an incredible amount of freedom. And I think as long as we don't take that for granted and we can take that freedom and utilize it to create a life that maybe will function when there's less freedom. I think there's a lot of opportunity there to utilize that. And I think a lot of people are waking up to that fact.
Yeah.
And I think that it takes many generations for that desire for freedom and that knowledge of freedom, what we have, to die. It's very much in North America built, even in Canada, built into us. There's a reason our ancestors came here. It wasn't because there was a better king here. It was to get away from the kings. So we have now, granted, okay, my family came up as loyalists from America, so we were still cool with a king. But the US especially, but I think Canada has a certain bent as well to that where our ancestors are here, and that has been passed down through the generations of a love of freedom. And I don't think that's going to get stamped out easily. If you look at China, a place like China, they've had centuries of top-down centralized totalitarian control in various formats and respects and all that. But it's very much built into their culture not to just assume they should be free as humans. So I think there is a cultural difference there between North America, even Europe to an extent, and other parts of the world.
Yep. I'm going to take that as basically we still have a lot of ability to do things. Our scope of action hasn't been totally confined yet.
That's right.
Basically, I think a lot of these things we've talked about so far are simply ability to build now. and in the near future. And just the fact that we have that ability and that we see people wanting to start using that is reason enough for optimism.
Yeah. The more people that keep changing the normal, it's going to lend itself to a much better future. So subscribe to our podcast. Give us a rating or review. Leave us a comment on YouTube. Email us at changingnormal@protonmail.com. To bring in even more freedom.
That was such a good segue. We skipped like half the show.
No, I wasn't trying. That was like the commercial break right there.
Okay. And now a word from our sponsors, ourselves.
Jake Pay. But
see, he segues and he doesn't even mean it. We're about to talk about Bitcoin and he mentions a Bitcoin exchange. Like,
let's go to Bitcoin.
Oh my goodness. A huge part of the freedom thing is Bitcoin for me. The ability to have responsibility. It's sounding like a broken record at this point. It's Segue, the broken record. But like we're going to dig into the how it's a technological leap forward, especially aside from even just a centralized like a CBDC, but just the sovereignty, the individual responsibility as a money, and a hard money at that. While it's digital tech, it's internet money, magic internet money. I've heard that a fair bit this last week too.
I need to get that book.
We're going to become a book club channel.
Yeah. So I think what makes me so optimistic, especially when seeing through the potential of Bitcoin, is making the leap to a hard money, a money that isn't inflated in supply continually, but it's not going backwards to the previous hard money that had limitations. It's taking all the advancements of digital transactions and bringing the hard money element to it, so that we have all of those rolled into one, in leveraging technology so that it can actually work. But this isn't really the tech side of things, but more about what impact it's going to have. And I think more responsible investment, pushing us away from the current economy that I think when I look at the economy, I see it becoming less and less productive. More and more money is getting pushed into the stock market beyond any reasonable return any of those companies can offer for their stock. More people are simply buying up assets without any intention of doing anything useful. That's why we see news articles talking about, Bill Gates buying thousands and thousands of acres of farmland, or the Chinese investors buying up so much real estate. We have all that money being turned into less productive avenues simply to try and hang on to wealth, to act as a store of value. And so if the money can do that, we don't have to have that money getting diverted into asset holding. It could actually be pushed and incentivized to go into productivity.
Well, because it is its own asset holding in that sense.
Exactly.
Because when you don't need to fight inflation, you don't have to have all those other investment things simply to try and maintain the value of what you've earned.
So it has massive ripple effects when you look at that. Trillions of dollars could be diverted into more productive paths.
Yeah. The other side of it, of course, is the sovereign money side. So the fact that we can be optimistic about the future because we have an option. Right. If we do see a social credit system wrapped in a CBDC, we do have an option that's has a significant amount of adoption across the world already, and is snowballing. I think at this point, I think the Bitcoin snowball is rather large now.
And orange.
And it's at least it's not yellow. It's I don't know that it can be stopped at this point, even if there was a massive global movement to stop it, simply because there's just so much adoption happening. So we have that option to transact outside of the system. And that's a reason to be optimistic, because if we didn't have that, man, we would be severely limited in what we could do outside of the complete government control through a CBDC.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, even with the adoption side of things, right? We got the Lightning Network in and of itself now have over 4,500 Bitcoin, whole Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. Bitcoin, it's coming for like the Lightning Network. That's the most optimistic part of Bitcoin for me, is like just how fast. I mean, who did I hear say it? Someone mentioned that like Lightning is still in beta technically, or something like that. Like, and it's just like, it just keeps pushing the giant Bitcoin snowball down the hill, and it's eventually going to just topple everything. Mm-hmm. Like it's already got like with Geyser through Geyser.fund or the Breeze app, like that's crowdfunding completely anonymously, uncensorable, with a sovereign hard money. Like that is like with, and the reason that's so cool is because like with the truckers protest and all of the GoFundMes and Kickstarters and everything like that, and it's like, oh, well, no, the government actually deems that this is an illegitimate cause to be raising funds for, so we're going to cancel it. But not anymore with Geyser. Like, it's like, what is it? Three or four folks that are working on that project, and it's just moving full steam ahead. They've got like 100 different fundraising projects that are lined up to get put into the crowdfunding, the crowdfunding sphere. And so that part is super cool for me, as far as like the Bitcoin optimism and where it's heading in the future, because it's, there's people working on it worldwide.
Yeah.
I mean, it's only going to go in leaps and bounds.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the constant or the periodic exclamation that Bitcoin is dead, every 3 or 4 years is quite hilarious. Because if anything, you would think these people would look at a little bit of history and go, well, yeah, this has happened many times before, and every time it bounced back even stronger and stronger and stronger. And it's funny that people don't recognize that Bitcoin is not just replacing things, just it's eating them, and then because it's producing a better product that not only replaces it, but does it better in so many ways. And we're going to get to the point where things are going to start getting built, even not just dedicated, like Lightning Network and all that, but you're going to actually start seeing things like currencies built on Bitcoin, where they're, I listened to a podcast, I think it was a Bitcoin Magazine podcast, where they were talking about, this one guy was just like, you're not bullish enough on Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is either going to die or be the only thing out there. There's nothing in between. That was his whole argument. He was quite the character. But I just don't see that. There's going to be too many people. There's going to be a period of transition. And yeah, in 100 years, maybe it'll be Bitcoin will be the only thing. But in that time, I mean, just in the last 13, 14 years, how many layers have we started to see? I mean, we're already starting to see layer 3 solutions being built.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to see a period of transitions where we're going to still have fiat type currencies, but they're going to be backed by a Bitcoin or something like that.
Right.
You know, so it's not quite as we're kind of getting off topic with all of that, but
it's a bright light at the end of the tunnel, bright orange light.
yeah. Well, everything okay, let me finish the Bitcoin talk with this, unless just people want to say something. But I know we talk about Bitcoin a lot, and we talk about economics on this show a lot, which is hilarious for being a person who grew up having zero understanding of economics. Really, I'm just self-taught, and it's terrifying because I'm saying things on a podcast and I really don't have a clue what I'm talking about. But everything we do is built around economics. Like almost every decision we make in life, we go to work. Why? Economics. We need money. Well, what is money, right? And all of a sudden now you're down the economics rabbit hole of why am I doing this thing?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's super, super key. And now I'm going to segue into schools and education. It's something we're not taught. I consider myself to have been, decently well educated and, as a younger person, but I wasn't really taught, economics.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly not macroeconomics. It was, here's how you balance a checkbook. And if Jan has $5 and, has 2% interest, like that kind of stuff. But there was no, here's how the dollar works. So I just think economics is so important. Everything we do right now is and it influences every part of our life. There's a downturn in the economic wealth of a country. The government messes with the fiat currency. That's economics. We pay more at the pump. That's economics.
Mm-hmm.
It just influences everything. And so we're going to keep harping on this Bitcoin thing because sound money is the key to sound economics. So
it changes the philosophy and the mindset around so many other things. It's like the ripple effect. I definitely definitely saw it in myself as I delved into the Bitcoin rabbit hole, and in doing so, like you said, with in the notes we have turning away from government, schools, urbanization, and starting to think about practical skills again. But that's really what I kind of started doing more or less after really getting introduced to Bitcoin from you guys. Things like realizing, oh, well, I can't just, work for the weekend and then lay around and do nothing because, it makes me feel good. But I'm going to have kids one day. I do now. And I can't just sit around and do nothing because that short time preference means that their life in the future is a whole lot harder. So being optimistic and having that, looking out further and seeing how I want my kids to live and how I want to affect the people in my circle, and all of that is the philosophical and the mindset change.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely influenced by Bitcoin and the sound money principles.
Yeah. I think you're seeing that whether they realize it yet or not, and most people probably don't draw those conclusions. They think a lot more surface, than you have. But people just intuitively go, things are not right.
Mm-hmm.
Things are not good. I don't really know why, but things are not good. And, maybe they have specific topics they don't like what their kids are getting taught at school. Maybe they're disliking their life in the city. Maybe they're saying we want a little more security in different areas around food or what have you. And so they're moving out of cities, moving to rural areas, taking on things they might never have seen them doing before. I think COVID really sped that up. And I said the bad word, COVID. Sorry. I think COVID sped that up. And I think that's why you saw this mass exodus out of urban areas for the rural areas. How many people will stick with that long term? I have no idea. But if nothing else, there's optimism there because many of us in the rural areas went, oh, we're maybe not alone as we thought. Maybe the people who already were on this path went, oh, gee, there's actually a lot of people who think this. They just never had anything just kind of kick them out of themselves out of the nest or spur themselves on to actually taking real life steps to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And how many more people still have not done it, but still have that mindset, and it will simply take another thing to get those people kicked in the butt,
Yeah, for sure. If the memory of the last few years doesn't fade too quickly, then hopefully that motivation sticks with people to
exactly
start making a difference. I think more connections have been made through this. I mean, in one way, we've been more isolated when you look at people who don't agree with the mainstream views of what they must be doing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's less isolating in a way because people of similar views have been pushed together by these outside forces where they had been more dispersed and
that's right.
Not really pressured to hang together as we are now.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're probably seeing a lot more communities, whether they're actual physical communities. Sorry, did I just steal your point, Ben?
Yep. Meaningful relationships. That's all I was going to say. Meaningful connections.
Yeah, I think you're seeing a lot of those people kind of pulling. And I hate the term pulling together, but coming together.
We're all in this together.
Yeah, exactly. But getting together and going, hey, we need to be a little more intentional about this.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely. I think there's a lot to look forward to if people continue to move away from government schooling.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to dive into some of the numbers on that.
Ooh, numbers.
Interesting. Yeah, just a few, not too many. During COVID, in the states where we've got decent rough estimates, there's like a 63% increase in homeschooling. So pretty significant. I think an extra 1.3 million-ish students were learning outside of that. That's an additional. And so perhaps 1 in 4 of those maybe are going to go back to the government schools, but there's still been a significant gain even with that regression.
Mm-hmm.
Going from, I think, like a 2 million-ish student baseline, better than 3%. But that's going to be closer to 5% in the future, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be a positive trend, because once you hit the 5% adoption rate, you can start picking up steam potentially. And there may be bigger organizations that look at things like equality with the funding side of things. I know New Hampshire is looking at this. They want parents to have the ability to direct funding for their children's schooling to the place of their choice. If we could see things like that start succeeding, that would make a big difference.
Yeah.
That's neat.
There's good news all around. Good news. Our first news story isn't quite good news right off the bat. Well, I mean, I guess it depends. Like we've got a few news stories in here now. Let's go with the Bitcoin one. So BlackRock, the BlackRock plans to launch like a spot futures trust, basically private trust for Bitcoin. And this might have been what that guy was talking about when he said, you're not bullish enough on Bitcoin. Bitcoin's going to be everything.
Well, this guy was like, so he said, I'm not even bullish enough. He said, it's not possible. It's like trying to understand infinity. He said, it's not possible to be bullish enough because we have no idea how amazing, how big Bitcoin's going to get. That was his whole, he was talking like 37 sats being generational wealth kind of.
Holy
bullish.
Moly. Oh my goodness.
Because I think, is it 37 sats like the last stage of release of Bitcoin mining rewards? Isn't like it
calculated it out to that degree?
Oh,
they
wow.
calculated it out to
the last right. block reward of new Bitcoin.
I think so. I think that's what he was referring to. Anyway, sorry.
Man, that's so far in the future, though. I mean,
we're never going to see it. Our kids might not even see it. So yeah, it's.
But they're like, the quotation was, "Here comes Wall Street," because now that BlackRock is getting in on this, it obviously spiked the price of Bitcoin, something that big. And the BlackRock CEO Larry Fink has really kind of spun around from his view. Was it 5 years ago? I think it was. Just Bitcoin's just an index for money laundering, and now Bitcoin has the potential to become the biggest global market out there. But we got I didn't do much research on this. I think, Dan, you might have put this one in here, the drought in the US and the cattle cull.
Yeah, that one's definitely a serious prolonged drought, and just due to my background with cattle, that's something that's super interesting to me. So I've been following that as more and more ranchers have been liquidating cattle, keeping less replacement heifers. We're going to see a dip in the cattle herd numbers that we haven't seen since 2011. So that's going to have some ripple effects that are worth noting for people, even regular consumers. That might mean that beef costs in the short term may be lower to buy. We may not see it as much here because we're not in a drought, but definitely in a lot of places, they may be able to get really cheap beef.
I like beef. That's a good idea. That sounds good to me.
So that's the short term. Long-term one is, since we're going to have reduced national cattle herd numbers, the long-term outlook is higher beef prices. Definitely higher breeding stock prices. Maybe not as soon as next year, depending on how quickly they can rebound from the drought. But we're definitely looking at a 2 to 3 year upswing in beef prices. So hopefully that makes it back to the producers and not just the middlemen.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. The other one I had in here, I heard it on the radio. I was like, I wonder what some of the details are behind that. And what it was, the main story is that one of the past presidents of the United States, Donald Trump, was searched by the FBI. His residence was searched, not just searched, but raided. And come to find, and it was a breaking news story from the Daily Wire. I was like, okay, cool. I heard about this on the radio. I'm going to actually dig more into it. The Attorney General personally approved the search warrant. This was personally approved the FBI search warrant. And then when they had the press conference to talk to him about why and what, he kept them waiting for 30 minutes. And it's a confidential FBI human source that was the catalyst in that.
Huh.
It's just like
Trump or hate Trump, the fact that the administration currently governing the United States,
they can't forget about him.
Approved a search on the former president. I don't know. Like, that really seems almost like political persecution, especially knowing he's going to try to run again in 2 years.
Yeah.
It is interesting that people think the mere possibility of Trump being president again means the end to democracy. Never mind the fact that he would have to win a democratic election to get there, but attacks on the loser of an election is not seen as a threat to democracy. Interesting perspective.
Like, how many laws did Hillary Clinton break with her laptop and personal emails and confidential information and all that stuff? Like, when are they raiding her place? Like, they didn't raid the Clintons, probably because they didn't want to be suicided. But, it's...
You could have found the Epstein list in there, probably.
You didn't see the Babylon Bee headline then, did you, about
no,
specifically mentioned the Epstein list? There's a disappointed FBI agent said, no evidence here, as he shoved aside the Epstein client list.
Man, the Babylon Bee hits it out of the park every single time.
Oh, so good. Anyway.
The one I saw was the meme I saw said Elon Musk buys or puts in bid to buy the FBI for $100 billion. Still haven't heard whether the Clintons are going to approve the sale.
Oh my goodness. That's pretty good.
Anyway.
If you've got any feedback on this episode, thanks for making it this far, but you can send that feedback to changingnormal@protonmail.com. You can also check out our landing page if you're so interested. It's Blueberry. That's BLUBRY.com/changingnormal. Smash the like button, hit the share button, tell your friends about us. Or you could just, instead of sending the entire podcast episode or YouTube video, you could just create a clip on the Fountain app, send a little blip. You could hit us up on YouTube. We're on Odysee, our Twitter handle, and that, I don't know, what did I call it? A dumpster fire? Changing_normal. And then, fountain.fm, the app that you can actually earn Bitcoin just by listening to the show or any of the other shows that you may listen to on a regular basis. We're on iTunes, Google, and we're also on Spotify now. Finally.
Woohoo! Finally they accepted us.
I mean, they've got Joe Rogan on there, so we're done, guys. We made it.
It must be that $20 I sent the CEO in the mail.
Finally made it overseas. But if you wanted to send us some money, via Lightning URL, changingnormal at fountain.fm, or you could just stream some sats to us for value as you listen to the show, or send us a boostergram, give us a comment on Fountain, and let us know what you think. We really would love to hear some feedback and then be able to respond to you on the next show. So thank you very much for listening. And remember, take small steps, be courageous, and change your normal.
Oh, that's good. Oh, that's a good tagline. Nice. I love
Write
it.
it down quickly.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Quick, write that in there. Okay.